boldness and inventiveness of the imagery in making change makes it a really compelling exhibition. That it is so easy now to find 19 Indigenous photographers to represent Australia to a largely Chinese audience is something that is relatively new and certainly inconceivable 41 years ago when the newly elected Whitlam government radically transformed both Australia's relationship with China and with its local arts and Indigenous constituents. With the Whitlam government came a mammoth injection of funds to the arts via the Australia Council, and every state and regional gallery benefited from this injection of funds. There were changes in photography. In October 1971, the National Gallery of Victoria's Department of Photography, the only art museum photography department in the country, and one that was still run by a committee because there was as yet no curator. It curated an exhibition called Frontiers, and it was an exhibition of largely experimental photography by a range of, by 5 photographers. On the 28th of September 1972, just a couple of months before the federal election that was to see Whitlam become Prime Minister on 2nd of December, the Department of Foreign Affairs began to work with the gallery to send the exhibition to Asia. Not China, but the Philippines, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Malaysia and Singapore. By the time the exhibition was launched in 1973, Australia's official perceptions of Asia had been radically transformed, and this openness to new ideas seemed to be echoed in the official embrace of experimental photography. The rebadged exhibition now also showed the extent to which work produced by photographers with little overt interest in national or regional politics could be repackaged as a gesture of international goodwill. Equally, the arts sector was made well aware of the fillip it could receive by seeking government patronage. David Moore, Wes Stacey and a committee that included Lawrence Legade, Daniel Thomas and Peter Keyes was successful in gaining Australia Council support to establish the Australian Centre for Photography. To perform the honours for its official launch on the 1st of November 1974, the ACP invited none other than Margaret Whitlam. The Whitlam years saw photography getting unprecedented exposure to a wide audience, not just a handful of devotees belonging to a camera club. There were changes also in Indigenous affairs. In January 1972, Aboriginal activists from around the country travelled to Canberra to establish the Tent Embassy, and for much of the next 2 decades, land rights marches were a regular occurrence in the streets of Sydney and elsewhere. Photographers were on the scene, not just to report for newspapers, but to record the events for posterity, because Aboriginal leaders knew the importance of having good images to ensure future histories carried their stories. With the exception of the Alice Springs-based CAMA, the Central Australian Media Association, all the other organisations that I just mentioned were here in Sydney, based in Redfern, and the seeding money for them all came from Whitlam initiatives in the arts, including photography, and a commitment to social justice. The first major photographic project to bring this groundswell of change to fruition was after the Tent Embassy. That was in 1982. An exhibition, and then a book by Marcia Langton with assistance from Wes Stacey and Narelle Peru, highlighting radical improvements over the previous 10 years, as well as ongoing disadvantage. Langton pitted the noble savage and colonial victim imagery of the past against powerful contemporary photographs documenting vibrant communities and leaders going about their daily lives in all manner of circumstances. This work here documents the opening of Marawina Women's Centre, Women and Children's Centre in Everleigh Street, Redfern, The work on the left is the Aboriginal and Islander dance troupe, which predates Bangarra. But you can see that there was certainly a lot of horrible archival images, but there are also a lot of very contemporary, vibrant images. That not one of the photographers in the project was Indigenous is as much a reflection of unequal access to education and resources. Significantly, apart from the exhibition, which toured parts of the country in community halls, access to the images was typically through the Koori Press, to photo archives in state libraries and contemporary histories. They've rarely emerged, a lot of these images rarely emerge in the art museums or in the kind of classy photo histories. Theories of modern art, such as those developed by Duchamp, that emphasise idea and intent as more important than something physically made by the artist, have not translated well into the histories of Australian photography of this period. For example, Aboriginal leaders such as Mum Shirl instructed photographers to record particular people and events so that future histories could be corroborated with appropriate visual documentation. Typically, accounts of contemporary Indigenous photography begin in 1986 with the NAIDOC 86 exhibition of Aboriginal and Islander photographers exhibition, curated by Ace Burke with assistance from Tracy Moffat at Burke's Aboriginal Artists Gallery, what used to be down in Sussex Street. And these are two well-known images from that exhibition. So this exhibition is regarded as the first to represent urban Koori photography as art. The curators brought together key photographers such as Moffat herself, Michael Riley and Brenda Croft, and others. And we saw a sustained critique of the photo archive being made by creative resistance to colonial stereotypes. But it was this later exhibition, this NAIDOC 86 exhibition, that brought together contemporary, urban, Indigenous photography. And it expanded the recognised repertoire of Indigenous art practice from just bark paintings and acrylics to include new media. Compared to the 1982 after the Tent Embassy, which was both cross-culturally collaborative and unabashedly political in content, the 1986 NAIDOC exhibition was generally more elusive and driven as much by the imperatives of the artists as by the cultural milieu in which they worked. To Sydney audiences, the colonial critique that was there in some of the works, through witty visual strategies, was a manoeuvre that not only established the aesthetic and contemporary credentials of the artists, but masterfully revealed the political gravitas and authenticity of their long-neglected urban Kooris. But I wanted to end with this image because it just shows how much is still missing from our understandings of our visual history. We haven't got the story in place yet by any means. I came across this cutting down in the archives of the National Gallery of Victoria. It had been sent to Jenny Boddington, the first curator of photography, and it tells a story of an exhibition of the work of two photographers, Keith Morgan and Robert Pearce. I've never seen any reference to it in any history. I've just never, it took me quite by surprise. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are more stories like this. We just need to do the research to try to uncover them.
I created this particular body of work that I'm going to show you, and this work here, Scar Tree, Fowler's Creek from Fowler's Gap, which I'm sure a lot of you know about through the residency program out at the research station north of Broken Hill. This image, I went looking when I was out on the property and walking around the actual station at Fowler's Gap and looking for signs of Aboriginal occupation. And this was the first scar tree that I came across. And I was absolutely thrilled to find this in the creek bed. So this is the creek that you have to drive over to actually enter the property. And it was wonderful being there, walking around. It was country that I was familiar with because as a child we would go to visit Nan and all my cousins out at Menindee. This is a part of the property that's further south than the actual where all of the houses and the the dormitories and things are. And this image is one of the only images that I've actually created with a figure in it. And part of my thinking behind this particular image was we were looking, facing towards what I was calling the settlement, so where all of the station houses were. I found that being out here, it was a place that for me, I could feel the spirits of the ancestors here, and part of my reasoning behind that was the fact that scattered right across this country are the fragments of stone tool making practices, so shards of quartzite, just wherever you stop and look on the ground, there are all these shards everywhere. So I've just felt like it's very rich, strong ancestral country. And looking at the past theses that have been written about Fowler's Gap, I couldn't find anything about the connection to this particular place from an Aboriginal perspective, apart from a few lines here and there. And so for me, I just wanted to show that this is country that's very rich in Aboriginal history. And so the light here is incredible, as I'm sure anyone who's been out there knows. The rocks just glow. It's the barrier ranges, just light up in early morning and late afternoon. It's one of the most inspiring places for light that I've been to. This is an image which is taken from just sort of heading further north to one of the furthest northernmost points on the property, where the Ochre House is situated, and this is a permanent waterhole, and it's very much a men's site, and that was the sense that I got when I was there, and didn't feel that it was a place that I wanted to go looking too closely up in the caves and things. But it was a place that I felt really strongly about, and I found it interesting that I was getting that feeling from the site. And when I spoke to one of our elders, Barkindji elders, Badger Bates, he said, "Yeah, Bub," he said, "that's definitely a men's site, but you would have been safe there." He felt that, I'm respectful and I'm not someone that would have done anything untoward or anything that would have caused any problems. But nevertheless, it wasn't anywhere that I was going to camp overnight by myself. And this is a shelter, a rock shelter up, sort of further up and back along the ridge, where a lot of that quartz is. And it felt like a shelter. I told this story yesterday. This image was printed at the printers. So I work with medium format cameras. I've got two different Hasselblads. I've got a 120, an old C500 camera, or 500C. This image was scanned in and printed, but printed the wrong way around. And when I went to pick it up, I thought, those rocks didn't go that way. And anyway, I got them to print it the correct way and kept the two, and so used that as a Rorschach image I thought it really did emphasise the actual shelter aspect that I was trying to show anyway. So these images are all printed black and white, and then I hand colour them. And this particular group of images, I've used a synthetic polymer paint. It's golden, and it's a very beautiful, rich, pure pigment. The colours are really strong. I use transparent paint so that you can still see the photographic image underneath, because that's what I'm about. I'm a photographer, and I like to show what I'm doing. I'm not trying to hide the fact that they're photographs. And this is another image of a leopard tree, and the leopard tree, that particular tree, is used for many different purposes within Barkindji culture. There's a sap that comes out of the tree, and that can be broken off and heated and then placed around a stick, and kids would walk around for days with their stick. It's like a lolly, but it's also used for medicinal purposes, so it's an important tree. And it's also a very beautiful tree, and it is very much like a leopard skin. The tree trunk itself has this beautiful patterning in it, and the late afternoon light shining on it just really brought out these beautiful colours, the oranges and the pinks and the reds in the rocks as well. So that's that particular series, and now I'll just talk a little bit about a body of work that I created working in the backwaters of the River Murray. This is an ongoing connection I have. I grew up on the Murray River, and sort of from when I was 13 until, still have this connection with the riverland of South Australia, and became really concerned in 2007 when the federal government stopped the flow of fresh water from the River Murray into Lake Bonny as a result of the droughts. We were in the middle of a 10-year drought. And so that image was really one of the images before the water was stopped from flowing into the lake. So this lake is a meeting ground, or has been a meeting ground for many thousands of years, for up to 12 different language groups. So Aboriginal people would come together from sort of all of the inland sort of lake areas. People would come down from many different language groups and meet at different points. And there's one particular place along Lake Bonny, which there's a midden that runs for almost 1 kilometre long, and it's about 6 metres deep. And that is a place where people have gathered and have cooked and eaten and had meetings and exchanged information. It's a really important place, and it's a place that hasn't been recognised as a culturally significant site, and so that's one of the things that I like to bring to people's attention, but also try to ensure that these particular sites are recognised and that there is something done about protecting them from people riding motorbikes over them, or taking artefacts and things that are still evident there. This particular tree is a birthing tree. It's 5 people can get inside of this tree. That's the actual scale of it. It's a little bit hard to tell from the image. This is actually a straight colour image, as was the one of the dead fish on the waterway. So it caused great problems environmentally when that flow of fresh water stopped. That's a ring tree where the actual branches of the tree are tied together when the tree is a sapling, and then as the tree grows, the ring stays in the tree, and it's a sign. It's a sign for other Aboriginal people that this is a safe place. It's a place of abundance. So there are rushes here that you can use to make string, to make nets, baskets. It's fresh water. There's a lot of food, etc. So these are just images of the campsites as I walked around, and this particular body of work I called attesting, and I've sort of ongoing, I'm still making more work related to that, and the image of winter that's in Making Change is an image from that particular series.
This first couple of pieces that you see here I made when I was an undergrad at COFA. Back in the early 90s, and it just kind of goes through and grabs a couple of different major pieces out of my work. It's not all my work. I made quite a lot of work every year, probably for the first 10 years, and then after that I made less work because it became more about research and my interdisciplinary practice developing. And also I think I just really would like to acknowledge Whitlam's role in us having an arts council, because prior to that leadership there was no Australia Council, there was no Australian art as such in the context of how it is today. We just pretty much regurgitated European art with the, even in the colonial context, there was always a European flavour there. So when the Arts Council evolved, there were, I think at that time, 2 major boards, the Indigenous Arts Board and the Non-Indigenous Arts Board. So then it emerged this new landscape of Australians really making work about Australia, about our culture now as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. I came here to COFA as a mature age student, thought I was going to be a painter, and I discovered I can't paint and I can't draw, not the way I wanted to. So I came with these skills as a photographer, because as Indigenous people, a lot of us grew up with families who collected images. And so my mother is not a photographer, but she passed on that skill and that love of photography and history together. And so I'm the eldest child, so I became the documenter of the family history and our local Indigenous kind of history. And then by the time I got here at the age of 25, I ended up majoring in photography. And I was also at COFA at the time when new technologies emerged within photography, the area of photography. So it just became part of my practice. So I went on to make a whole lot of work looking at history and those layers, and I guess in the context of the layers, for me, that was really important that that there was colour in there, because the history was black and white, the colour was my interpretation of, which is why all my early work is very highly coloured. And it was also used as a subtle way of engaging you into learning about your history, kind of making a pretty picture or making something look like a pretty picture that was pretty much a disaster. It might attract you to learn a bit about your history. So that for me was also, and it was also about the questions. My work was not really about answers. It's still not about answers. It's about how to engage the viewer into connecting to them, something in the work that might connect with your soul, that might provoke something in you that you can ask questions of yourself about, what does this mean for me? I think about after 10 or 12 years or something, I wanted to come back to my practice and do more study. I then started to, create my work. That was much more creating less work, because it was all, like I said, it was much more about exploring the research behind it, not just that surface kind of history, I guess, not just my family history, not just the Australian history, but after that 10 or 12 years for me, it was like, well, who is Ree in this? So then the work became about me. I thought art history was bullshit and it was just regurgitating the same old crap without my identity in it. And eventually some friends of mine was having coffee with me one day, and they said, why don't you look at it from a different way, Ree? Why don't you think about, if you know all about that history, then you can critique that history. And it completely changed the way that I saw the world, how I saw the history, and how I made my work. And so as a result of that, I've become not just an artist and a curator, activist, but an academic. There needs to be a new language. And if I think there needs to be a new language and no one else is seeing that language, or maybe there are other people out there seeing the need for that, then maybe if I continue to study and to connect to the right people and continue to research my work and create new ways of kind of engaging and seeing new environments, because my work is really an interdisciplinary practice across all art forms. I just start with an idea and I allow the idea to find the form. And sometimes I think I know what the form's going to be, and sometimes I have no idea. But it evolves into something, and it evolves into what it's meant to be. The Native Institute, for anybody that doesn't know about it, was an institution that was established out in the area, well, Parramatta originally, and then re-established in Blacktown, and was really the birth of the stolen generation pre-policies. Really affected and was a huge impact on the local Darug people. So it was interesting to kind of be part of this project and to make this work. This is the neon from the installation. It says native, which is reflecting on another wall opposite with vinyl text that says native back to front, with a church pew sitting in the space, and this is part of it as well. That's on the site where the Native Institution was. And the texts following this are all of the little language texts that floated across this digital board. There were 16 of them. And so it was a combination of me writing a kind of poetic connection into the different policies that controlled legislation around Indigenous people's rights, which really is the foundation of the regurgitation of the same policies today. Nothing really has changed, it just presents a different picture. When you sit on the chair, you activate sounds, which is a monologue that I kind of constructed from a couple of political speeches. I have 4 young kids who I decided to work with for the sound, because I thought nobody really listens to adults anymore. You can't put everything in one piece of work. And that's what's really great about, I guess, a journey as an artist. You don't realise that until you've got at least 10 years under your belt. But lots of people used to say to me, don't put so much in it, Ree. It's just too much. Now I understand that, you know, because really it's too much to put it in it, but that story in itself is the journey that travels through your work. And for me, that tells a story about me, which is why I can actually stand back from that history now, and I can make a connection to myself, and I can talk about me in my work, not in an egotistical, self-centered kind of way, but in a way that is about why that journey had to happen. Why didn't I know who Ree was in the first 10 years? Why did it take 10 years to find Ree in that space? And how can I move forward now in that journey?